My granddaughter's dress. I saw a dress in a consignment shop that I knew my granddaughter would love. But money was tight, so I asked the store owner if she could hold it for me. "May I buy the dress for you?" asked another customer. "Thank you, but I can't accept such a gracious gift," I said. Then she told me why it was so important for her to help me. She'd been homeless for 3 years, she said, and had it not been for the kindness of strangers, she would not have been able to survive. "I'm no longer homeless, and my situation has improved," she said. I promised myself that I would repay the kindness so many had shown me. She paid for the dress, and the only payment she would accept in return was a heartfelt hug. Stacy Lee, Columbia, Maryland.
Mari Agnes works tirelessly to support herself and her 9 children. She resides in the little Ethiopian community of Kalu. She regards her humble life as a gift from God, as it was God who raised her from the dead. "I was very, very sick for 2 months," she told us. Mari Agnes's mother said she arrived to care for her daughter one day. Her daughter, however, died. She approached and stroked my face. I was shivering. My eyes were wide open. Mari Agnes recounts, "She closed my eyes and straightened my legs. When my mother found out I was dead, she sobbed. As a result, everyone came in and began crying." Mari Agnes's protracted illness had finally taken its toll. Mari Agnes saw someone she recognized along the way. It was her husband, who had passed away 2 years before. "He came and took my hands, and he took me away," Mari Agnes recalls. "I felt like I was in an open ditch, yet I had climbed very, very high. When I crossed and left the valley, I came to a region where everyone was clad in gold. I saw the earth as filthy, but where I was quite free and clean." More and more people were flocking to her house to mourn Mari Agnes's death. "My relatives had come," she adds, "and they were non-Christians, Muslims, and they were crying a lot. But there were a few Christians praying." Warsa Buta, a missionary, was walking close. "After my salvation," Warsa recounts, "God told me, 'I will raise the dead through you.' From that day forward, I prayed fervently with that word. When he was passing by," Mari Agnes continues, "he heard that someone had died. So he came in and began praying. Non-Christians arrived and inquired, 'Why is this Pentecostal man praying over a dead body?' Mari Agnes' vision of heaven continued as Warsa prayed. 'My mother-in-law was dead, and she was there in that place,' Mari Agnes recalls, begging them to send me back so I could raise my children. Those in gold responded, 'She is quite young, so send her back. Return her.' Warsa remained praying even though Mari Agnes had been dead for 12 hours. 'I had faith the Lord would work through me,' Warsa says. 'I prayed in the same way that Peter did.' Mari Agnes, raise your hand. 'In the name of the Lord, I beseech you. Bring yourself to life.' When I prayed, 'Mari Agnes, rise in the name of Jesus,' she sat up in her bed. Then I found myself in my body," Mari Agnes recalls. "I sat up in my bed and asked, 'What is this? What is going on? What exactly is going on?' Then everyone was taken aback. A Pentecostal guy can call back a dead soul to a body, some wondered. If this is true, we shall all become Christians. They were also yelling. I was a Christian, and my husband was a missionary. I passed away as a Christian. Your God is a very powerful God, said the people who called Warsa. Make us believe now. I returned because it was God's will for me to live with my children. However, I would gladly return there. When a Christian dies, he travels to a better realm, and his body returns to dust. That is a miserable place for a non-believer, but when a Christian dies, he travels to a distinct realm where everything is good, where everything is very, very happy.
By most people's standards, Greg Montgomery was a successful man. He had a booming photography business, a beautiful family, and was a talented musician. But one day, out of the blue, his life changed.
My hands started to go numb, he says. I'm a fingerstyle guitar player, so I pick out the individual notes with a certain finger. I started to notice a little bit in my hands as I was playing, and I didn't quite feel the string like I should. I was a pretty heavy smoker at that time, and I thought maybe that the smoking was starting to affect blood flow or something. Greg and his wife didn't worry too much about all this until he began experiencing double vision. I got up to go to work, and I noticed 2 clocks. Being a photographer, obviously I depended on my eyes, and I saw everything going away: the business and the ability to work. I went to see my optometrist to start. He knew something was going on, so he sent me to another doctor. Greg made an appointment with a specialist. I'd been on the internet researching, and I had narrowed it down to either MS or a brain tumor. So I went in there knowing that I had one of the two. The doctor confirmed that Greg had multiple sclerosis, but the diagnosis was more than he ever expected. That was just devastating news. I'm a musician, and I'd already started to lose the ability to play. Now he's telling me I was going to lose the ability to walk. Pretty devastating. Greg didn't know which way to turn. Without faith of his own, he leaned on his wife Barbara for support. Then one day he got a phone call from a total stranger. The phone rang, and this gentleman was on the phone. He said, "I'm not really sure why I called, but, I just felt like I was supposed to." I felt comfortable with him for some strange reason. I told him about the diagnosis of MS. He said, "Now I know why I've called." He gave me scriptures on healing. He sent me a tape that he had done, and Barbara had a CBN tape from Integrity Music. I was on my way to Montgomery, Alabama, to a shoot, and so I took those tapes with me to listen and try to get my thoughts together. As he drove and listened to the tapes, Greg started thinking. I realized that I couldn't do this by myself. So driving down I-85 at about 85 miles an hour, I asked the Lord into my life. It was amazing the instant change that I felt. Nothing changed physically at all, but I just felt a release of the weight that was on me. Although Greg's heart had changed, he viewed his deteriorating physical condition as inevitable. Until one night, in a motel room, I was watching CBN, and I just really felt led to call and ask for prayer. I called about the business. We had prayer. I'd never asked for prayer about the MS because it, in reality, had been a good thing. That's what brought me back to the Lord. So we had another prayer just about the MS. I felt this warming sensation going all through me. It wasn't dramatic, it was just very subtle. After the prayer was over, I felt something in my spirit telling me to get up, and so I did. With my MS, I didn't feel my feet and my hands hardly at all. But I felt the motel room floor. I walked around the room a little bit, and I danced around the room a little bit. I shouted around the room. Greg was overjoyed. But the next morning, my feet were numb and my balance was off. I grabbed my cane and went to work just like I'd done for the past year. That evening when I got back to the motel, I called Barbara and told her about what had happened to me the night before. She yelled at me, "Why didn't you claim it? Claim it as your healing. That was your healing." And so that's what I did. Over the next 2 or 3 days, things started to work. I'd tell my feet to move, and they'd move. My fingers would move. When I got home that next week, we walked to the top of Kennesaw Mountain. I took my cane with me, but I carried it. We had pretty good church when we got to the top. It's been 7 years since that day, and Greg hasn't had any more symptoms of MS. He and Barbara are grateful to God for his healing and for the joy Greg has found in following Christ. The old Greg was to impress as many people as I could, to make you think that I'm somebody. It was indeed an all about me person. The Lord changed all that to where it's not about me at all. It's all about him.
Story about Deborah's faith in hard times. Judges 4 verses 1 to 24. Deborah was known to be a wife, judge, prophetess, and most importantly, like Mary, Elizabeth, Naomi, and many others, a powerful woman of faith. She was a woman who heard from God and would carry out his instructions no matter the difficulty, whether they were easy or hard. One day she was commanded by God to instruct a man named Barak to take with him 10,000 men to Mount Tabor. There, God would help him and the Israelites defeat the Canaanites' army, which had been oppressing them for years. Now, even though Barak had his army, he was still afraid to lead them on his own, so he begged Deborah to go with them, which she then agreed, and told them that God had already gone ahead of them. Judges 4 verse 14. It was because of Deborah's faith, her zeal, and her acting on God's word that the Israelites were led to a crushing victory. Life application: it's no doubt that we face our own version of difficulties, and though we might not be going into a physical war like the Israelites, we will be faced with spiritual attacks. We just have to take God at His word, because being fearful and drawing back will only hinder our victory. So let's step out on faith like Deborah, and watch the enemy be defeated. And remember, the battle is not yours, it's the Lord's. Story of Daniel's faithfulness and the lion's den. Daniel 6 verses 1 to 28. Daniel was a God-fearing guy, even a prayer warrior, who established his relationship with God by bowing before Him 3 times a day and praying passionately. Because of his calm and unassuming demeanor, he was elevated above presidents and monarchs. The other princes then sought to find anything to accuse him of, and the only thing they could discover was that he was praying to his own God and intended to use his faith against him. As a result, these individuals convened with the king to pass legislation mandating that anyone discovered praying to any other god or man be thrown into the lion's den. When Daniel heard the threat/decree, he did not stop praying, and his confidence in God did not waver. Therefore, he was thrown into the lion's den. Even when Daniel was surrounded by peril, in this case, lions, God was present. Fear not, Daniel, God says in Daniel 10 verse 12, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to humble yourself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come because of your words. Life application: our devotion to God will always be tested. Every day, we are surrounded by demonic influences or temptations, and depending on who we serve, we may have our own symbolic lion's den experience. But, like Daniel, our own faithfulness will be rewarded, and we will be able to walk away from our difficulties unscathed.